Jared Kushner landed in Moscow last week. It was not a state visit. It was not announced with fanfare. It was the quiet arrival of the American president's son-in-law, sitting across from Vladimir Putin to negotiate the terms of what historians will likely call an American surrender. Let that sink in. Why would Washington send its most trusted family emissary to the Kremlin at this precise moment? Why now? The answer does not lie in Washington. It lies in a small, ruined Ukrainian city called Pokrovsk. Most Americans have never heard of Pokrovsk, but this city just changed the trajectory of the 21st century. When Russian forces captured Pokrovsk, they did not merely take a town. They severed the last major railway artery supplying Ukrainian forces in the Donbas. What we are witnessing is not merely a diplomatic visit. It is the quiet acknowledgement of strategic defeat. For years, I have argued that Washington believed it could bleed Russia dry through a proxy war. Instead, America has bled itself, financially, militarily, and now diplomatically. To understand why this specific moment marks the end, we must first understand the battlefield reality that forced Washington's hand. Pokrovsk was not just a dot on a map. It was the logistics heart of the Ukrainian army in the east. Imagine a body where the heart stops pumping blood to the limbs. That is what just happened to the Ukrainian armed forces. This city sat at the intersection of 3 critical rail lines and 5 major highways. It was the distribution center for everything from 155mm artillery shells to the diesel fuel that powers NATO tanks. For 2 years, Russian generals who understand the science of logistics far better than Western pundits give them credit for have been methodically grinding towards this single point. They knew that if they took Pokrovsk, the entire Ukrainian defensive line in the Donetsk region would be cut in half. Units to the north would be isolated from units to the south. Resupply would have to travel hundreds of miles over muddy, unpaved backroads instead of efficient railways. By taking this city, Russia didn't just win a battle, they broke the logistical spine of their enemy. This leads us to the broader strategic failure. To understand this moment, we must revisit the decisions that created it. For 30 years, the United States operated under 3 dangerous assumptions. First, that Russia would accept permanent subordination. Second, that economic interdependence would prevent conflict. And third, that American military technology could guarantee victory against a nuclear-armed great power. All 3 assumptions were wrong. Russia rebuilt its industrial capacity. China provided the economic lifeline. And the global South refused to sanction Moscow. The correlation of forces shifted while Washington celebrated sanctions. Let us examine that third assumption, the belief in technological superiority, because it is collapsing in real time. The war in Ukraine has exposed a critical weakness in the Western way of war. We have focused on building expensive, exquisite platforms, fighter jets that cost $100 million, tanks that require jet fuel and specialized maintenance crews. These systems are marvelous for fighting insurgents in the desert. They are catastrophic for fighting a peer industrial power in a war of attrition. Russia, by contrast, focused on mass. They focused on artillery, electronic warfare, and cheap, mass-producible drones. While American factories struggled to produce 30,000 artillery shells a month, Russian industry, now fully mobilized on a war footing, is churning out hundreds of thousands. They are outproducing the entire NATO alliance combined. This is not a matter of skill, it is a matter of mathematics. In a war of attrition, quantity has a quality all its own. And in the mathematics of war, the West has been outcalculated. Within days of the city's fall, the envoy was on a plane. The official explanation, exploring business opportunities, is diplomatic fiction. Kushner carries the authority of the president-elect. His presence signals that Washington is ready to negotiate. For Putin, this validates everything. 3 years of war, economic isolation, and massive casualties have paid off. America has come to the table. But for Ukraine, this is the nightmare scenario. Zelensky understands that when your patron negotiates with your enemy without you in the room, your fate is being decided for you. Consider the timing. Why send Kushner now? Because Washington knows what comes next. Without the logistics hub of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainian front line is brittle. If Russia chooses to launch a winter offensive, there is a very real risk of a cascading collapse, a breakthrough that doesn't just take a village, but takes entire regions. The United States cannot afford a televised collapse of the Ukrainian army. It would be a humiliation worse than Kabul in 2021. So, the deal must be cut now before the map gets even worse. This brings us to the tragedy of the European position. While Washington quietly pivots to negotiation, Europe is left holding the bag. The leaders of Germany, France, and the UK have spent 3 years telling their populations that victory was inevitable, that Russia was weak, and the economy of Europe could decouple from Russian energy without consequence. Now, they face a reality where their security guarantor, the United States, is cutting a deal, leaving them exposed on the eastern flank with hollowed-out militaries and economies in recession. Why did the $175 billion American investment fail? It failed because of an industrial mismatch. Russia converted to a war economy. Their factories run triple shifts. American defense contractors maintained peacetime schedules. It failed because of alliance fragmentation. European unity has cracked. Germany and France are quietly calling for an off-ramp. And it failed because you cannot win a war by half measures against a nuclear power that views the conflict as existential. But there is a deeper, structural reason for this failure, one that goes beyond just shell counts and logistics. It is the failure to understand the balance of resolve. In international relations theory, the balance of resolve dictates that the side with more at stake will always endure more pain to achieve its goals. For the United States, Ukraine is important, but it is not vital. If Ukraine falls, the United States remains secure behind two oceans. Our economy continues. Our sovereignty is intact. For Russia, however, Ukraine is existential. A hostile military alliance on the Ukrainian border is viewed in Moscow the same way Washington would view Chinese missiles in Mexico. It is a red line that cannot be crossed. Because Russia views this as a matter of survival, they were always willing to pay a higher price, in blood, in treasure, and in isolation than the West was willing to pay. We thought we could sanction them into submission because we mirrored our own values onto them. We assumed they cared more about GDP than security. We were wrong. I identify this as a classic case of liberal delusion meeting realist reality. Washington believed that international rules would constrain Russian behavior. But great powers facing existential threats do not follow rules. They follow the iron logic of survival. Russia fights for security, to keep NATO off its border. America fights for abstract principles thousands of miles from home. In the calculus of war, the side fighting for survival always has the advantage of will. America can walk away from Ukraine and remain secure. Russia cannot. The Kushner visit signals the end game. Within months, we will likely see a ceasefire. Ukraine will lose territory, Crimea permanently, the Donbas likely. NATO membership will be taken off the table. Russia will achieve its core strategic objectives. This defeat reshapes global perceptions. Taiwan is watching. China is calculating. American allies everywhere are wondering about the value of Washington's security guarantees. The era of unchallenged American hegemony is over. Let us expand on the China factor, because this is perhaps the greatest strategic blunder of all. By attempting to crush the Russian economy, the United States inadvertently drove Moscow into the arms of Beijing. We have created exactly what strategic planners have feared for a century, a Eurasian superbloc. Russia provides the food, the fuel, and the raw materials. China provides the industrial base, the technology, and the capital. Together, they form an economy that is sanctions-proof. Before this war, Russia hesitated to be the junior partner to China. They wanted to maintain independence, but Washington's policy left them no choice. Now, Chinese cars dominate Russian streets, Russian oil powers Chinese factories, and, most dangerously, their military-industrial complexes are integrating. We did not isolate Russia. We integrated our two greatest rivals, and we did it while depleting our own stockpiles of weapons that we might need for a conflict in the Pacific. Future historians will look at this decision with bewilderment. Unless Washington fundamentally reassesses its grand strategy, more Ukraines await, more proxy wars, more defeats, more credibility lost. My analysis forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. America lost this war because it refused to understand the nature of power. The question is no longer whether Ukraine can win. The question is how much more will be sacrificed before Washington admits what the Moscow visit already confirms. The war is over. This is the structural reality the mainstream media refuses to accept. If you value analysis based on realism, not idealism, subscribe to Real USA Report. We will continue to document the decline of the old order and the rise of the new.